Hello everyone, my name is Jorge Diaz, President and Founder of Larry Jacob Internet Marketing, and I'm bringing you another episode of Defining Infusionsoft Success. This week I have the honor of having Ann B. Freedman as my guest. She's a longtime friend of mine, customer, and cohort. How are you, Ann?
You're great, and you?
I'm doing well, doing well. Hey, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. Ann is a speaking coach. And her name of her company is Speak Out. She, over the years, like forever, has been helping people look better on stage. And what's become more obvious over the years is that the same sort of things that make you a good presenter on stage makes you a good presenter online. So I thought, boy, this is like the perfect guest to start talking about the sort of issues that a lot of content developers on membership sites need to deal with, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, yeah, Ann, tell us a little bit about, what you do and, what day in the life of Ann looks like.
It's all a question of taking content that you're excited about, you're passionate about, and figuring out how to present it in as little time as possible, as effectively as possible, and to make the impact that you're trying to make. And it doesn't really matter whether it's live or increasingly online. The bottom line is if it's boring, if it's disorganized, if you don't deliver it well, it's not going to work.
Right. And we run into people, like in my business, as we're building membership sites, we run into a lot of people that have tons of content. And by that, I mean they give in-person live presentations to, let's say, realtors to teach them how to, up their game, or they bring together sales teams maybe in a conference setting, and they have a program that they run them through for improving numbers and, getting more referrals, engaging better with clients. And now they want to go online either because they're sick and tired of the travel, they want to bring the price point down because they think they're missing a gap in the market. Another reason could be that they want to, build a new income stream, leverage themselves. But there's a lot of good reasons. But moving from this live presentation model to online is not a walk in the park.
No, and there are a couple of factors that really could influence the success or the failure of this kind of transition from live to online. And one of them is the time factor, the time and attention factor. We will pay more attention live because a good presenter integrates their content with the audience. So the audience feels like it's part of the show, and back and forth. The problem with going online is you don't see anybody and nobody really sees you, and you don't really know if you're connecting or not. And part of that is also a time factor, where in 45 minutes, you can break it into segments and you can get the audience to get involved. 45 minutes of watching someone just talk online feels a lot longer.
Yeah, it's torture.
The statistics are that 15-minute videos are about the maximum that people really want to watch. And that's a challenge for most people who are content rich to reduce all of their stuff into 15-minute modules. That's where the heavy lifting comes. And then making those 15 minutes sparkle, and how to use the visuals and how to use you in a way that's very similar to live, but it's breaking it into much smaller components.
Yeah, and then also, how do you reinforce the lessons? How do you even make the course taker aware that they slept through half of the 15 minutes, so they missed some critical piece of information that would make going forward, a bad idea, right?
And you can integrate. There's all kinds of technology that lets you integrate little quizzes into the conversation. If it's a certain type of environment, sometimes the surveys can be played back. If there were surveys done in a live situation, you can say, this many people who went through this course thought this and this. There are ways of building in elements to make it feel more interactive. But the reality is they've got to be good, because you don't really know if they're working or not.
Yeah, no, right. And even someone that's really engaging in person. The other thing too is the switch to on camera. For some people, it's not too bad, but it's not I mean, I think ever since we were little kids, it'd say, little Johnny, get up in front of the classroom and present. But it isn't until really, the kids that are like maybe in elementary school now that they'll grow up and be used to being presenters in front of cameras because, everybody's got a cell phone now with a camera on it. But it's just not a natural thing for a lot of folks.
No, and there's an inherent fear that most people have of speaking. It's the number one fear on the planet, has been for centuries, really. And for some people, it's even worse on camera. So they really need to get out of their own way. As you know, George, I never expected to be an on-camera person. I was a print newspaper journalist. So I had my notebook and my pen, and I was fearless going to ask anybody questions anywhere. But the minute I had to step on stage, that was an adjustment because that's not what I intended to do. And then next going on to being in videos and producing them. So I'm very empathetic with people that say, oh my God, do I really need to do this?
Yeah.
And they know it's important for their business. All I can say is that it requires, just like being good live, a ton of practice to be good on camera. Makeup, hair, all these other stupid things, you guys don't have to worry about them. But for women on camera, you don't want something like a shiny nose to be distracting during your video. And from the sublime to the ridiculous, all kinds of things can interfere. If you're recording at your home, you've got to make sure that pets are put away, because mine tends to jump on my lap and you see this big black tail, and it's happened in countless times. So there are things that you don't need to worry about live that do also sound effects. If you're recording in a studio, you don't have a problem. But if you're recording in your office, you have no control over the elevator sound. You have no control over somebody coming in and slamming the front door or getting coffee or making noise.
Yeah.
And so these are little sideways things that can interfere with the success of your production. They don't seem like big things, but you spend all this money and time to put it together, and those things can unravel your professionalism pretty quickly.
Sure. So let's say, a typical presenter could be that, they rent, a room at a hotel and they bring in 20, 30 people, podiums, you got, watered, the water pitchers and the little candies along the table. And so, they've got a really good script. They probably have it in a, a folded binder that everybody gets. And there's really a ton of content. And they've got their notes, their PowerPoints that kind of match with that. So how would you go about, I guess, taking that, this is something that they're likely successful at in a business, and now they've got to move it over and put the same thing online somehow?
The challenge is, and the biggest recommendation I can give based on all these years of helping content-rich experts, the challenge is breaking it into modules. And generally speaking, a module is 12 to 15 minutes tops. You take one topic and you force yourself to do it in a 12 to 15 minute bite, max. You can have a whole bunch of these modules with openings and highlighted points and a close. But that is the easiest way, actually, to break your expertise into bite-sized pieces that somebody else will get.
Yeah.
A good presenter live is actually doing that. So if you're used to having those kinds of modules when you're presenting, it's not obvious to the person in the audience. But if you're doing a 45-minute live presentation and you're good, you really have 3 12 to 15-minute presentations embedded in that 45-minute presentation. So if the speaker before you was running late and they said, could you shorten it? You just drop out one of the modules. But if you're doing it live, you want to make sure each one is powerful and self-contained.
That makes sense.
And that makes it easy.
Yeah, and then, so here, like, let's say, if it's like a weekend thing, it's likely that it's, maybe 2 sessions in the morning, 2 sessions in the afternoon, a total of 8, 1 hour blocks or so with breaks and lunch and stuff. So you could, I mean, now I'm thinking like, I'm the web developer, I'm the guy that puts these on our website, that you've got 8 modules, each of which is made up of 3 or 4 sub-chapters, lessons, topics, whatever you want to call them. And then you've got to figure out, okay, how do I make these units digestible somehow?
And that's where the key of the time factor, to me, becomes so important. So it's easier to manage the information as a learner if you have smaller bites. It's a little more work if you're the course developer.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
One long 45-minute video, but it's also actually easier to edit smaller ones because you can fix them more readily rather than having to have all that footage that you've got to wade through. Something happened at 31 minutes and you've got to go back and fix it. So I think the days of the very long videos are over because nobody's going to sit through them in the first place. And it's also very hard for you as the presenter to keep that energy up for 45 minutes on a camera.
Yeah.
You're going to make mistakes. You're going to hear yourself saying things that you never intended to say. They're going to have to stop. You're going to get the advantages. You do have do-over online.
Yeah, live you're toast.
So live, you laugh. You just keep going. On camera, you get to do it over again, but that adds to your production time, that adds to the editing time, taking the stuff out. So if you're working with smaller elements, you're actually going to have less do-over and less likelihood that you're going to have speaker fatigue, which can happen when you're live.
Yeah. And then let me ask you, one thing I just think in transcripts, some people, if they have a full transcript of all the presentations, I mean, some people just they like to read stuff.
So there are pluses and minuses. Some people are using teleprompters to do their online presentations. The downside of a teleprompter is if you really don't know it well, you're going to sound like you're reading. And also your eyes people are going to see your eyes moving across like this and know.
Yeah, and I tell you what, I've tried to use teleprompters and it doesn't work for me. And it's much more work because you've got to say, okay, I've got to memorize this pitch and then say it, where for me, and it's amazing, the news guys do it all the time.
Yeah, and it is an acquired skill like anything else. Like people can play golf. I can't hit the ball when I play. Once in a while I hit it, it's a great big deal. Some people who use teleprompters look totally natural doing it, but it is the exception, not the rule. So it's okay to have prompts in front of you. And this is part of the purpose of visuals also. If you alternate your on-camera presence with slides, for example, the slides on your speaker's prompt, and you can easily emphasize those points by looking at the slide. And then the next part, you're on camera talking because you know that stuff really well. And then if
you go back and forth.
You go back and forth. It also is more interesting for the viewer to see that way. They're not just looking at your pretty face the whole time or your handsome face in your case. And it just gives them something else to maintain their interest. Another thing today that a lot of people are doing is they're weaving videos into their videos because the younger generation we all love video, let's face it. But it is a normal way for millennials to learn. So if you can create videos within your videos, it's going to be easier to maintain attention.
Yeah. Let's cut over to this guy's, here's an example of two people interacting, and then, in a live scenario, it'd be like, okay, I can go backstage, take a drink of water and relax. In a video, it does the same for the user, for the listener.
What you're simulating in a live situation, you might have two people in the audience try out something that you've talked about or elicit their response live. We can't do that in an online learning situation. So if you use those video examples of what you might have done with a live learning situation, you accomplish almost the same thing.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Cool. So what else? What are the challenges? The teleprompter thing just keeps coming back because I did a presentation I needed to use, and I did a teleprompter, and my wife goes, "You're so much better a speaker. What were you doing?" And it was like, And she goes, don't use a teleprompter. And I mean, frankly, I didn't have time to become an expert at that. But I tell you, having done a lot of this, I've gained a huge respect for the newscasters, because
they also have, remember, they have state-of-the-art equipment. It's very large. They're not using the same teleprompters that you see.
No, but even on top of it, because they've got a teleprompter that goes right in front of the camera lens, which, by the way, I had one of those, not the real expensive ones. But the other thing, they're listening to people talking to them. Very rarely do you hear, you see the professionals go, hey, I mean, sometimes if it's in the middle of a crisis, it's like, guys, hold on a second, someone's telling me something. But they rarely do that, and those guys are chatting all the time.
And so it's hard enough to think. Just you thinking. Can you imagine thinking and having somebody talking to you at the same time? I mean, we're smart and we're talented, but that's another haul. Yeah. That's why they're the professionals doing that. So if it's your turn to be presenting, you do have the option of using the teleprompter. I spoke with a prospective client recently who wanted that, and I said to him, I have never, ever really found that it worked for my clients. Yeah. If that's what you want to do, more power to you, but I'm not the right coach to help you with that, because I need the presentation to come from you and for you to connect with the audience. And essentially, when they're using a teleprompter, they're reading the presentation. It's scripted. And if they go too far off the script, the teleprompter can't keep up with them, and the message and what they're delivering aren't the same. And that can be a disaster.
Yeah.
So most people need the flexibility of saying, oh my God, I said that. I didn't mean to say that. Now what am I going to say? And giving themselves the room to be creative, to step out of the mistake, if you will, or realize that they didn't plan to say something, but something's happened in the room or in the news since they put the presentation together.
Yeah.
And they feel as though they need to add something to it. And that same thing happens online. You got this inspiration that you didn't really plan. Well, go ahead and do it. You don't want to be afraid of doing that. And if it's in the script, it's not a good thing.
I'm assuming you heard my dog, right?
Yes. This is one of the things we were talking about online. We have certain environments that you've got to be able to pre-compose yourself to do.
And it's very important. I'm sure the mailman is probably here because it's about that time. We build, 3 or 4 membership sites a month, and 50% of our times, probably more, content is the biggest issue. We can crank out, I tell people it takes 6 to 8 weeks to build a good membership site, assuming we get the content on time. And but we've built sites in 2 weeks if we had everything already lined up.
A rule of thumb that would be helpful to you, George, when I'm working with someone for a live presentation, I tell them it's 2 to 3 hours for every minute to do a good job.
See that, and I know people typically underestimate that,
they know this stuff and they can just say it. Yeah. And sometimes it does happen. But most of us really have to work hard from the concepting to the crafting of the words, to thinking about the visuals, to how the order that we're presenting it, how are we opening it, how are we moving from one point to the next, how are we closing it, what do we really want at the end to happen? And so when you're doing online, you have those same considerations and more.
Yeah. So, again, I always... early on, people are probably wondering, why is he asking so many questions about the content? Because the success of the project, first of all, hinges on that, and so does the timing. But most of my clients have a day job. This isn't the only thing they do, so they've got to do their regular job and take on the writing, the recording, everything that goes into putting good course material together. And, people can't underestimate, which is why, hey, talk to Ann, because she's the one that can kind of help you get through that.
And I'd be glad to. If you know what you're talking about and you're passionate about what you're presenting, those are my 2 criteria for working with people. Because if you're not passionate about it, it's really hard to stay up and on a consistent basis. And that's what requires live, but it's even more critical when you're on camera. You can fake it only to a certain point, and then it's really obvious to everybody that you don't care about what you're talking about. And the know-how, well, you probably wouldn't be involved with George or thinking about making your course online if you didn't know what you were talking about. And the other thing I'd like to say to people is, if you don't share it, if you don't push your content out there into the universe, you're being awfully selfish. You're preventing people from benefiting from your expertise. But it is like an exercise program. You can't just do something once or twice and get proficient. It is an ongoing practice scenario, and it does take time not only to identify the right content and figure out what really belongs online as opposed to live. How do you adjust it? And then practice, rehearsal. It's a different kind of rehearsal live than it is on camera.
Sure. Well, Anne, thank you so much for sharing all these tidbits of wisdom. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been my pleasure to be with you.
If they want to reach you, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, the easiest way is to go to my website, which is www.speakoutinc.com, or they can email me. It's speakout and then inc@the-end.com.
Cool.
And I thank you.
Cool. We'll make sure to list that up when we post this up on the site. But thank you very much, and I'll probably see you next week when we get together.
I look forward to it. See you soon.
Take care.